So welcome back to our valedictory session. So I will ask the dignitaries to take their seats. Already Gangopadhyay sir has taken his chair. So he is the chairperson of this session. I will request Professor Abhay Pete to take his seat. Pradeep Apte sir, please take your seat. Ajit Ranade sir and Ravi Pandit sir is joining online. So already Pandit sir has joined. Uh, this is the last and final session of this conference. Quickly, in 2 minutes, that I will introduce everyone. First, I will introduce this the valedictory session chair. Dr. Subhashish Gangopadhyay is the founder and research director of Indian Development Foundation, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. Uh, we have Professor Abhay Pete, who is the chairman of Academic Council NISM, and he is also a special advisor to Vice Chancellor Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. Welcome, sir. We have Pradeep Apte. Professor Pradeep Apte is is a former emeritus professor at Savitribai Phule University, and he is a visiting faculty to Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. Welcome, sir. Uh, we have Nishant Chadha, sir, is economist with PhD in economics, University of Columbia. He is with IDEA. Uh, Mr. Ravi Pandit uh, is founder and chairperson of. He's a founding member of this the Pune International Center, and uh, he's the founder of this the KPIT. Welcome, sir. And now I hand over this session to our session chair, Gangopadhyay, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vishal. This is our last session, so and we will try and finish it within the given time of 5 o'clock. Since most of the people sitting here have gone through the whole day, so they know what has been talked about. So we'll have to depend on Ajit and Ravi to tell us some new things. So what we thought we will do is we will first give those who were not here the floor so that you can speak first. So, Ajit, why don't you start? Ajit, are you there? No, Ajit is not there. So, Ravi?
So I don't
Ravi?
know whether not be. Yeah, I'm there. I'm very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can not being there for the whole day. I don't know whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage because I don't know what was the flow of the discussion during the day. Let me tell you what where I come from. So and I might give a little bit of background. Um, see, this is about urban reforms. So our conviction, my personal conviction, of course, is that urban areas are the engines of growth and uh, the future of I think the growth of this country will depend on how we manage our urban areas. And obviously, the management of urban areas has many facets. And maybe I'll talk about one area where I believe good work needs to be done. And I think before I do that, it would be important for me to talk about where I am coming from. So, and so that's an experience that I would like to share. And I see Dr. Amanat Zai here. He has been my colleague, Janvani, for the last 12 years. So Janvani is an institution that we started to look after urban areas, especially Pune. And the areas that we looked after were multiple, such as analysis of urban budgets, such as participatory budgets, transportation area. One area where we worked very long, almost for last 8 years, are management of solid waste. In that context, we had the occasion to deal with all aspects of an one facet of urban management to this period. And I must say that that experience gave us insight, which covered many mayors, many commissioners, and many staff inside the in at least two municipal corporations. And this is what I these are some of the observations that I have. Now, they don't deal with finance of urban areas, they don't deal with other areas. They deal really with the management of areas. And I believe that core area of the efficiency of urban areas depends on the management of urban areas. So I find that there is significant scope for improvement about how we manage urban areas. Now, cities are very large, and I think they are not a very easy animal to manage. And I sometimes wonder whether those who have been entrusted with the job of managing cities, especially below the level of commissioners, I wonder whether they have the necessary competence to uh, to really to really address a task like this. I find that uh, I mean, you have at that level you have superiors uh, who are team members quite often. Again, not really experts in management skills. And you have juniors reporting to you, of course, can be improved quite substantially. So I don't envy the people who have to manage large areas. I believe that there are problems of cohesion, there are problems of vision, and there are problems of basic management. I have seen over my last 8 years, anytime there is a change of guard of either the mayor or the commissioner, the policies of management change quite dramatically. They don't actually draw on the experience of the earlier, should I say, regimes. And then quite often you start from the beginning. So I wonder if it is possible to have this kind of a 5-year plan which says that on a particular topic, these are our objectives, this is what we will try to achieve, and these are the mechanisms through which we go. And I think that will go a long way in giving a kind of steady vision to what we should be doing. Good, steady, long-term vision will go a long way. I also believe that basic management functions. How do you manage that? I mean, there have been umpteen cases where you have meetings with senior people and they vanish at the last moment because somebody from state capital has called. No, that's not the way companies are managed. And I think in timing management, people who are in a meeting, all of that needs so much to be done. Sometimes I wonder if the management practices they have, how do they achieve what they actually achieve? It's almost impossible to do anything really substantial. Uh, I also believe that we need to have a good combination. Let me go a step back. You find flashes of brilliance and you find periods of extraordinary good work. But this happens really in such a person dependent way, which means that the processes of systems are not working properly. Actually, systems and processes should be such that they are almost like agnostic personal brilliance of a particular human function. But that process needs to be improved quite substantially. And laying down those processes, including assessment of people, including goal fixation, including training of those people, all these areas leave a lot to be desired. I wonder whether just making additional funding available to the institutions is actually going to change much. This is one as far as the management of this is concerned. Uh, you know, uh, I also believe that uh, we as common citizens have something more. I think the apathy of people in the management of their own cities is a significant factor which affects quality of cities. And, Janavani said that the name of the foundation is voice. And I think we have been engaged, find out only to know that getting people to really uh, get vigorously involved in the management of our own cities is not a very easy job. So we need to do some work in creation of awareness, creation of enthusiasm for our own city. In a city like Pune, actually, things are much better than most of the cities because we are very socially conscious. Even then, I think more needs to be done. So I stop here. So my 2 points being work to be done at the city management and work at level. Because without that, I don't think we can get really any good results. I personally believe that this problem is now can become even more severe we will live in the kind of cities that we have uh, learned to now live with, which is tragic. So with that, I think I'll close my remarks. I should be happy to participate in any further discussions we are discussing.
Thank you very much, Ravi, for making it short and to the point. I will now follow the order as is given here. So I'll start with Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'm going to do, since we are few and we have been listening intently to everything that went on, I'll briefly go over all the sessions and my takeaways in 1 or 2 lines. That's all that I'm going to do this valedictory session. So, starting with Patricia, I think the 4 things that I liked about the story, and obviously it can't be grafted onto Indian situation because of all the difficulties that Abhita pointed out. But I think effective ownership that she talked about, of saying, this is my city, this is my project, and I will fight for it. And that's very important going forward. The second was the idea that pragmatism can sometimes overtake set rules or legislations, which has shades of Elinor Ostrom's work. The third is what she said, that don't believe that only one thing is right, that try to be humble when you prescribe any policy path. I think that was important. And finally, the 4th thing that was a takeaway was that don't be disheartened by mistakes and messiness, because we are used to that. So don't be disheartened by that. You can make up, and you can sometimes make up, sometimes not, and messily plod around, but you can reach ahead of where you were. As far as the first session was concerned, I was part of it because Mr. Sitaram Kunte didn't come, so I've already said what I had to say there after the excellent presentation by Mr. Abhinav Jha. I would still reiterate that the important thing really is capacity building and efforts towards that with respect to everybody. And I heard Mr. Ravi Pandit talk about citizens' responsibilities and stuff, and the lack of capacity with bureaucracy at some levels. I think I would second that. There are efforts that are going on with the help of academia and, Yashada and so on, where we are trying to set up modules for training, etc. The real problem I find is not with the top level bureaucracy. These guys are smart people, they catch up and they're competent. It is the moment you get even to the second, just below the top guys, there is such a tremendous gradient drop in capacity that how anything gets done at all in Mantralaya or in municipality, sometimes I wonder. So, and the reason is that our HR policies and the way we select these recruitment and training during the period, and whereas our friends from the IAS have this happy way of being able to go to the best of the universities in the world on sabbatical and get trained, etc., or at least to the IIMs, these chaps don't really get it so much, at the lower levels. So they remain file pushers, and they actually look up to I've seen this, look up to the senior and say, "Atama kai liyaaycha yachavar." So he will dictate and say, "You write," they make this comment and push it. So if you want them to be more than file pushers and be part of the governance system and the processes, I think they need to be trained, and that capacity needs to be built. And of course, data is very important. We keep on talking about evidence-based work and so on, but we don't have reliable data which is compiled in a user-friendly manner. I'll just give one example, sir. When we were doing some work for the Reserve Bank of India at Rakesh Mohan's PS on housing startups, we tried to do a pilot for Mumbai, and we wanted to set up a transition matrix from when the permission is given, when the plinth comes up, etc. And since Mr. Kunte was the commissioner and is a friend, I called him up and said, "Zara, facilitate this data." His officer, he said, "No problem." His officer took our people to a big garage, opened the shutter, and there were thousands of files. And he said, "Ye data hai, आता क्या है अपना तुम्ही काढा." So compiling it in a user, and all of us have suffered this. If we ask for data and we were happy to get it, we get it either in JPG form or PDF form. And if we try to tell them की अरे पण हे कुठून तरी हे टेबल झालं ना, मला तो सोर्स डेटा दे ना, आता you're giving me this, so give me ते साहेब मिळत नाही, मी आत्ताच आलो या पोस्टवर. So, all these small things matter. And somehow, if we are able to put together a good data warehouse for urban, we would be able to make more meaningful discussions and debates rather than opinionated fights. The third session was on financing cities, and there was a nice presentation by Vasudha. And unfortunately, it was really focused on LBFTs and the prior to that, which is land records and setting up, which are all terribly important. But really, cities are, if they have to be financially empowered, there is a way in which, this is one of the ways in which we'll have to seriously get ahead and do something. I agree with Ravi that this is not a panacea for everything that we are wanting to do, but or it can solve all the problems of financing of cities, but it will help in a big way, especially now when most of the revenue handles are gone, and we know that property tax, however reformed, is not going to get you more than 30% of your expenditure requirements. So there will be, these are wealth creators, but the way we set up our tax design, the whole tax buoyancy goes to higher level governments. Higher level governments must therefore be mandated in some way, or they must find it within their pragmatic rationality to send this funds down, not as an aid or assistance, but as investment. Because this is the golden goose. This is what is giving you all the tax buoyancy. As far as the LBFT is concerned, AUDA was discussed, and the great work that actually Patricia commissioned for George Peterson was discussed, and the work that Shirley Bellani and Bimal Patel did in actually computing and showing how much of resources can be gotten from the AUDA region if we were to do that aspect of it. I don't like the word monetization, but public management, better management of public lands is, I think, a way to raise resources. Fundamentally, of course, the point remains that in India, land is a state subject, and therefore whatever we can gain from this may not necessarily go down to the municipalities. But if it comes to Team India, hopefully it will come down to the municipalities, or we can make some rules for that. But for that, in India, I think when the examples of Canada and other places in Australia and the Lands Company were given, I think we need to start thinking along those lines of setting up land commissions or setting up some kind of crown companies, which would, because this is the problem that was mentioned is generic, that no department is going to say, railway is never going to say, I have so much of excess land. So you will have to have somebody else, and that somebody else has to be a crown company. It cannot be a private company. It must operate like a private company in working out the excess land, and then put it to, which I am being very sensitive here, put it to strategic use using a public kind of evaluation of it. So not just monetary gains and so on. This is a long-term project, and it will take some time to do, but we need to move along these directions. Then we had the session on what, keep smiling, on shared spaces. I agree with you that when we talked of shared spaces, a suggestion that came from the chairman, actually, I remember in one of our discussions. I was thinking more along the lines of the living city and the planned city in terms of actual land use plan and so on. You with your poetry, philosophy, and sociology gave it an entirely different kind of a dimension. Um, I'm an economist. I say this without apology. But, if cities are divided, then these shared spaces will also currently, unfortunately, come in divided modes. The rich have managed it. The rich have gamed any system, so they don't worry about anything. The poor have managed informal networks and so on, the kind that you and others write about, to work out, and you yourself work in MEs, etc. I think they've worked out. The middle classes are going to face tragedy. But they are used to, they are always, that's why we have this popular thing about middle class tragedy. You live with it for some time. I think the only way is economic development for this. Because this change in culture and modes, etc., etc., if you start planning, as Sulakshana was saying, and keeping certain places as, for public spaces, they are going to be encroached in any vibrant city, given our capacity to implement rules. That is my fear. So, I mean, it was very interesting to listen to it, but it's very provocative. Can warrant a full seminar on that sometime later. Okay, and then we came to the final session, Swami Kiran, there also I spoke. So I think the idea that I liked was being strong and grow and be strong. That is your best way to go about, rather than having very specific nitpicking about how you face the public bad of climate change. The paper was interesting insight. And then the discussion that followed actually was even more interesting, that the idea that the lens should be adjusted, the idea that social inequality, etc., needs to be factored in order to look at the whole infrastructure in trying to... So getting a broader and a more cohesive and a larger frame to tackle climate is the way forward, is my takeaway from it. So, and then we come to this. We will finally summarize, I guess. So, thank you very much.
I'm not in the habit of summarizing summaries. So we now have thanks, Abhay. We now have Professor Pradeep Apte.
I have only few aspects which I think need to be flagged. Firstly, we have been discussing as if we are discussing by and large metropolitan cities, whereas the class 3, class 4 towns, which have their own problems, which have their own peculiarities as well. They have different connectivity with the surrounding villages, and they also face the problems of urbanization with very different shades than what we usually tend to think when it comes to policies. I think that needs to be addressed. The reason I am mentioning this for 2-3 reasons. Firstly, there is a lot of pace in developing road infrastructure as well as rail infrastructure. As a consequence of this, many small towns will get differently connected than they have been. And consequences of this would be the shift in the migration patterns. Some of the migration might accelerate, some of the migration might perhaps slow down, if not decelerate. So the nature of labor market is likely to undergo change, and that is probably going to happen to many small cities which are getting covered by these new road networks which are going to develop. So we have to in fact think more radically differently when it comes to such kinds of small townships. Their situation in terms of resource availability is even worse, and it's pathetic in many cases. We have been talking about the quality of human resources that we have at the disposal of the local government. I think the situation is even worse there. And perhaps Dr. Kelkar will remember in our regional imbalance committee, Bakshi didn't have a single joint secretary to assist him to draft and look at the tables. Forget about the doing anything more, because all the officers that were supporting him were mostly supporting of something like an infrastructure, nothing more. So if that is the situation at secretariat level, just imagine what it would be for the class 2, class 3 towns, where the nature of human manpower, which is supposed to man several official positions, but don't have vision, capacity, even to understand the kind of legal responsibilities that they are supposed to carry out every day. There are three elements which previously have been as a part of urban process, but have either vanished to some extent or relatively neglected. The first one, for example, take the example of Pune. One of the reasons why Pune as a city grew was not because of industries, but more because of education. And Pune was also, not only Pune, also Mumbai, had lot of its own schools where very large number of poor families were able to enroll their students. And I know many of my friends who, in fact, at least at their initial, maybe to the 6th, 7th standard, they had their education in municipal schools. These municipal schools are more or less now dead in Pune. This is one area where probably with the existence of existing good educational institution, something like PPV could have been probably experimented with, or could still be experimented with, because many of these schools are now only getting converted into municipal corporation offices, regional offices, or whatever you call it. So this is one component, because education happens to be one of the not a social requirement on the one hand, and this is also more demanded when it comes to living in urban life. And if you want these people to live in urban life, getting some kind of an education within affordable limits of their incomes is necessary. You can get this reflected in terms of, for example, there is a very large amount of Gautam Chatterjee referred to this, but we have not discussed this. There is a very large, thriving, unorganized, unregistered sector operating in every city. What is happening in these sectors? And it is not necessarily only services. There are also lots of manufacturing. In fact, probably the large slums are also producers of very different kinds of industrial articles as well. So the economy of unorganized sector operating within the fold of the urban entities is something which remains even undocumented. Forget about knowing their problems. They have their own versions of problems. For example, having electricity connection, having a water connection for the regular production activity that they are carrying out. So this is one area which probably also needs to be looked at, because we think of rehabilitating the scheme, putting up a 7-storied, 8-storied building in place of the in SRA. But what happens to that economy inside that slum? Apart from the shared spaces, I think this is even more burning and pressing kind of an issue, because you are effectively displacing them from their existing area of operation. They have their own transportation difficulties as well when we try to relocate slum from one place to another place. This is a genuine issue. This is a difficult issue, and I think probably in some of the villages which get merged in the townships, large townships, these issues also crop up, but somewhat differently. So this is another area which I think we need to look at when we think of urbanization in India. Another major important element, there are large parts of the country where water scarcity, which is where, as we had done in case of balanced regional growth report, water also has a mixed characteristic. It is at the same time partly a private good, partly a public good, even a merit good. Providing water to different kinds of uses within or on the outskirts of the city is partly a problem of pricing, also partly a problem of managing the volume. We have been speaking as if we think only of supply side, but I think even in this supply side case, we are a lot more deficient than what we like to believe. Related issue of that, perhaps people in Pune should be more acutely aware of this. We are a relatively water abundant city. But the extent of water that we use and we just refuse to recycle it is something which is almost criminal. We don't recycle more than 30%. And the whole thing goes as a sewage water in the rivers, and all the downstream people are required to face all kinds of problems with this. So recycling of water is one of the important urban management problem, and it should be taken seriously. So harnessing water and increasing and ensuring equity-based supplies as a right to everyone to have certain kind of a water for household or individual uses is one part. Second part is recycling that, which is in fact the water and sewage management problem and recycling of that. I think the range of technologies that are available now than they were say 30, 40 years back, when many of these schemes that we use as recycling, they have undergone very dramatic change, and world over there is a very large market for differentiated kinds of technologies, both in size and scale. And unless the urban governments are very made serious about this, I think this will remain one of the large looming problem in coming 50 years. We think of climate change, but one simple example of the climatic variability, I don't know whether the climate is really radically changing or not, but the variability in climate, which, like for example, in Pune, if there are no rains till 28 June, then Punekars get terribly panicked, because they start imagining how much amount of the water scarcity would be there, how it will be rationed, and how many times you will get it. So, just imagine this is the situation in Pune, then what it would be in the other townships where probably we don't have even 80 days of ordinary rain, not heavy rains, even ordinary rains cyclically. So this is one problem that we have to address, and again this is very sharp in many class 2, class 3, class 4 towns. In COVID period, I think one important deficiency of the state government was revealed, and state, like education, like land, health also happens to be predominantly a state subject, and that was inadequately available in the villages is well known, but we believe as if it is adequately known in all urban centers, which is not the case. Had it been the case, then probably our ability to cope up with the calamity like COVID would have been very different. Health, again, there are some hospitals, very good hospitals in Pune. In fact, KEM Mumbai happens to be one of the hospitals which is linked with BMC. But if you look over, say, last 3 decades or 4 decades, the kind of establishments which are capable of providing these kinds of more diversified and more subtle health services that have come up, there are very few. We have many private medical colleges that have come up. Had they been simultaneously supplemented by the establishment of such kind of local government-based hospitals, then probably many more medical colleges could have been run. They are not so amply available. So there is another neglected sector taken to be on paper constitutionally responsibility of the state, but it has to be by and large managed because it requires a lot of micro planning, lot of micromanagement. Therefore, it has to be at least to some extent managed by the local government. So these are the areas. Abhay has already talked about data. We have a student in Gokhale Institute who is working on what is happening to ready reckoner rates and how are the rates of the flats or the tenements that are being constructed, how are they changing over a period. There is a saying in Marathi which says, Nadisa Mool ani Rushitsa Kool Bagu Naka. I think it applies to this data. If you start looking for what was the benchmark through which all this started, this benchmark is something like Sai Baba taking Ankti from air and giving it. There is no basis, there is not a piece of paper available in TMC which says how was this proposed and who invented this. Okay? This is going to be probably the most important conclusion of our PhD thesis, apart from all other things that she will do statistically. So data is obviously a very compelling requirement. Already much has been talked. The land records we talked, but even for the purposes of managing and maintaining services, having the GIS kind of systems for the purposes of managing the ordinary services which the local bodies or the urban government has to implement, not many are in place, not many are in good shape or to the extent of depth and the coverage and the complexity that we should have. I know this because I was associated with a software company mostly in Florida which had a combination of both because it gets hurricanes and almost it's an annual event that the whole thing gets displaced. So they had a data up to which pole, whether it is a wooden pole or a metallic pole, and then the replacement. Everything is drawn on the basis of a GIS map, and that kind of a map is something which is still not yet available even in very large populations in Maharashtra. So I think these are the more compelling, even immediately compelling kind of data gaps that one has to really address. economists are always data hungry people, so they will always say that data are not available or not adequate. But these are, I think, the data which are necessary for even managing the daily routine affairs of the urban government. So these are some of these issues which probably we can explore even further in our further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep. Now it's up to Dr. Nishant Chandra.
Okay. So I'll start with one thing that actually has stuck with me throughout the day and a half, which was two things that Patricia actually mentioned yesterday. It was fascinating because Ghent is actually a beautiful city. I did not know the past, so that was interesting. It almost reminds you of Dickens, and the first time you actually see London and the north of England today, right? Because you go to Manchester, you can actually say that Manchester was what it was 150 years ago when, or actually now about 200 when Dickens wrote about it. But anyway, so two things that I think she mentioned was one, she was talking about these cities, the equivalent of slums, and a university study that looked at the demographic composition of cities and challenged the perception that the cities were not actually inhabited by immigrants, but by the local poor, which changed the perception enough for the state, for government to actually think about what to do with them. Because so sometimes I think it's not feasible or appropriate or too time consuming to change people's culture or perceptions. It's okay, I think, to use those perceptions pragmatically in ways which work the way you want. But more importantly, this is a university study. It's not commissioned by the city because they want to know something. So I'm going to comment on the one thing that I do know about stuff, which is data. That's what I do for a living. So I'll keep my comments to that. But what I want to bring out is a slightly different aspect of it, right? So one is this, right? It's not being commissioned. These are not commissioned studies. These are university students doing something which is later very useful. And then there was a similar thing she mentioned on a master's thesis that actually changed, that saved the cathedral. So if you go to Ghent, there are like 3 structures, one after the other, and the main one is the cathedral, which is quite a big draw now. So again, this is a master's thesis on the architecture of the cathedral, right? So we now have, we talk a lot about data, we have a lot of data problems, and I don't think we are going to solve these problems. I understand what Dr. Pete said and what Pradeep just said. We are not going to get that data. It's just not going to happen. It's too expensive, it's too cumbersome, nobody wants it out. And it's also because we link data to accountability. I think data has more use, information has more use than accountability only because it can allow people, it can allow everyone to innovate. You can think of solutions, you can think of ways of doing things which are different than what are being proposed right now, but you can't do it unless that some sort of information is available democratically, and we actually now have that kind of information, and maybe that is what we should focus on. So just Pradeep mentioned these GIS maps, and there's a lot of information now that is available. We saw a presentation that Shomik made using night lights data. Now, this would not be possible with existing data because city-level economic activity, and Dr. Kelkar is, I don't want to get into the details of it, but city-level economic activity is very difficult to capture using traditional means of doing it. We had done some work last year, I had done some work on using mobility data from Facebook. Similar is available from cell phone companies. And that's actually, with a little bit of thinking and economic modeling, you can actually use it to understand long distance migration. You can use it to understand commuting patterns in cities, right? So there's been these things now keep happening. And for example, there is a study using cell phone data in San Francisco, millions of people, which says that pedestrians don't take the shortest path from point A to point B. As simple as that, but they don't, right? And that actually would be quite useful in designing pavements and walking spaces and cities and things like that. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to start thinking about trying to figure out ways to get some of these new kinds of data available, put them together, and the critical aspect is that if we expect solutions that we want to come up with, the problems are many, but if we are going to want innovative solutions, we have to let more people participate in these. We have to let more people participate who don't, for example, have the patience or the time to go to municipal offices, try to get information. If we restrict to only those that will take that pain, we are not going to get solutions because we will not get those kinds of people. We know why people are apathetic in Indian cities, because it is too costly to participate. You can't blame people don't want to do it. I think if you increase the cost of participation and then pass on the responsibility on them to participate, it's not going to happen. That's how people behave. We can crib about it, we can complain about it, we can discuss it in this room. It's not going to happen. So I think if we make it possible for people who are sitting in their offices and with a little bit of work can actually provide solutions that others can work on, I think that's a great idea that we shouldn't leave on the table. So that was one. I think we need to make data more democratically available. It's like innovation is almost like a market discovery of a price. What people value, markets in some cases can tell you very well. Similarly, if you want innovation, you have to you can't direct data that, look, IDF will do this study or University of Mumbai will collect this data. That's not how it works, because ideas can come from anywhere. So you have to allow people to generate those ideas if you're looking for new solutions. And just the second point that I wanted to make, which I don't have much about, but I think we talked a lot about, even in this session, we talked a lot about transforming governance and how we think about it. And there again, I have this one thing that I've thought for a very long time. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think that if I think about the increasingly about the political incentives that elected officials have to do things or change them, if citizens are going to blame city governments for any success or failure, the state governments, elected officials at the state level have no reason to demit responsibility to the cities, because they're going to get blamed for whatever wrong they do. And, you might get some credit for something good that happens, but then that's too far. And city officials will have no incentives to do anything because they don't get the vote for what they do. Unless if elected officials play a big role, I don't know what their incentives are, but I think we need to, given how centralized our elections seem to be, where one person's name is being used, if everybody votes for the Congress because of Rahul Gandhi and everybody votes for BJP because of Narendra Modi, then it doesn't really matter what you do, right? I mean, so all discipline is internal to the party. It's not actually coming from outside. And if that is something that is true, then we need to worry about it, because I don't think anybody then has the incentives to change things the way we would like, and we would like city governments to have all the elected official city governments to have all the power. They won't, because they won't be able to exercise it in the way that citizens expect it. So it's not going to happen. So just a thought that I've had today, if I'm going to do that and end that.
Okay, thank you, Nishant. Actually, we have some time. So I'm quickly going to put down my thoughts as throughout the day. But I'll first start with, we talked a lot about people's apathy, the lack of ownership, etc. But I also think we didn't talk about the attitude. And I think that is very, very important to me, the approach that we take. And I'm going to exemplify it by a story. I spent some time going to a foreign city, and they give me an apartment to stay, which is, on the road, and it's about 500 meters away from the university, so I can see the university from my balcony. The road in front, I went in the month of September, the road in front was closed down because it was a 2-lane road on both sides, so 4-lane road, 2-lane going this way, 2-lane that way, because they said that they're going to convert it into BRT, create bus lanes. everybody was actually quite happy. So first thing in the approach, first thing in the story, nobody complained that they were taking away 2 lanes for the car to put in a lane for the bus. Anyway, so given my experience of the BRT in Delhi, I was obviously rather intrigued. So then I went again there in May, and I found that the road had been neatly laid out. They have these special street lights for the bus lane and the private car lanes, etc., etc. They'd done all of that. The roads were still not open. So I went to the university and I asked my colleague and friend that, Stefan, why haven't they opened up the road? Because I have to take a circuitous route to get to the university because the road is blocked. He said, no, the road hasn't been done. I said, of course it has been done. You should come and see. So finally one day I got him over to this side of the university to show him. And he looked at it and said, no, the road hasn't been done. So I said, what do you mean? Pavement is yet being laid. And that day I realized that there is something very different from the way we approach our citizens and the way they approach their citizens. The bus lane was done, car lanes were done, the pedestrians' walkway wasn't done. And therefore it is not yet complete, it will not be open to anybody. I think we don't have that approach when we talk about our citizens. One of the things I want to point out is that we discussed a lot throughout the day about the poor in the city. I'm going to be a little bit provocative because after all, the last day, end of the day. I think one of the big problems we have in India is making policies for the poor. It just gives rise to very poor policy making. I'll give you an example, again from Delhi. The DTC bus, which is meant for the poor, and the metro rail, which was meant for the citizens. It's a big difference. When we plan for everybody, we tend to make better things than when we plan for the poor. When we plan for the poor, we look upon it as charity. We don't look upon it as accountability. That we are supposed to do it as policymakers. We think we are doing a service to the poor. We have to stop thinking. The pedestrians, the sidewalk is important because the rich and the poor walk on it. They are not doing it for the poor. They are not doing it for the people with no cars. Right? They are doing it for everybody so that everybody walks in. And this we can see in government schools versus private schools in the entire country. When I was growing up in Calcutta, the 3 best schools, Hindu school, Hare school, Baliganj Government High School, were government schools. The 3 top schools. If you couldn't get into that school, people thought you were a Dumbo. I didn't get into either of those 3 schools, by the way. So, but then the private school space started growing, and people started moving out of the government schools. Government schools lost their voice. Nobody talks about it anymore. And the better schools, even in Calcutta, are not the government schools anymore. So this is something we have to understand. When we start distinguishing among citizens as policymakers, that's a disaster. Because you're responsible to every citizen. And that's the reason why we cannot think of a situation. And I'm again going to give an example from our own history. The PDS, Public Distribution System, ration card mechanism, was not done as a subsidy for the poor. It was done for food security for everybody. And then in the 90s, we started listening to everybody else and said that why should the rich get subsidized food? The rich were mostly not using it in any case. But then we started thinking about targeting PDS and look at the corruption we created because of that. Right? And that is why data are important, because if we look at data, we can see it immediately that the states where PDS corruption is a lot less are essentially the states where there is universal ration cards, and the states where they are the most is where we have the subsidy for the poor. So we have to stop, thinking about poor differently from the rich. We want the poor to have the best of everything, and the only way we are going to give them the best of everything is if we give the best of everything to everybody, not if we put them in a separate class, and therefore create the DTC bus for them and not the metro for them. Whereas in the metro today, the peon and the CEO travel together. So that's an important thing to remember in our approach, and I thought that this story that I saw in my, and I lived through it, being prejudiced as I am, it was a big awakening for me that we have to stop, thinking about poor. Okay, the one thing that, most of the things that we talked about, we have been talking about for many, many years, right? I'm sure that anybody who has gone through the urbanization literature has seen everything that was said, more or less. So I think we need to think differently. And one of the thoughts that I'm thinking about since yesterday, since Patricia's talk really, is there anything that we can do to incentivize the growth of new cities? Because even when we were talking, we did mention this to the second and third tier cities. But, 99% of the time we are looking at problems in Delhi, Mumbai, etc. So can we, if we are to urbanize, and we need to urbanize clearly, land is scarce, land productivity is much higher on urban land than on rural land. We need to draw people away from agriculture. There are too many people in agriculture. 50% of the people can't subsidize another 50% of the people, right? So we need to take them out of agriculture. So if we are going to do all of that, we need to grow more cities, not just grow the current cities, but grow more cities. Is there any way we can incentivize, or the center can incentivize the states, right, to develop new cities? So that's one thought. I have some thoughts on it, but we can discuss that later. The other thing that I was thinking about is that we did talk about slums, and I've, sort of seen Gurgaon grow. I went and saw the Bengaluru when the airport was being built. I went and saw Hyderabad, the land between the airport and the city. And I realized that we are repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. We create this, infrastructure. Obviously, land prices go up. We parcel out these lands into blocks. And we we worry about efficiency of the government, maximizing revenue for the government, etc., etc. But we don't think about the fact that why are we building cities like this? Why do I say that? All of us, unfortunately, we need people around us to help us. We are incapable of looking after ourselves. So we need a maid, we need a gardener, we need this guy and that, handyman. We need all of these things. But when we are building the cities, we never once think about where are they going to stay. Obviously, slums will develop. And if you look at the slums, the history of the slums, in the modern cities, I don't know what happened historically, but I'm seeing it in Gurgaon. I've seen it in other cities that are growing, especially these new areas which are being developed. The slums are growing wherever you have these 400 yard, 500 square yard plot lands, right? Because all those people need these people to support them. And there is no thought of them. And then we start complaining about the growth of slums. So why can't we, think about, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that we think of roads, we think of cars, we think of buildings, we think of infrastructure, we think of everything. But we never think about the citizens who are going to stay there. We do not start from the demographics of a city that we think is going to happen here. Who are the type of people who are going to come? What would be their age? What would they like to do? And where would they go? We discussed a lot about public spaces. One of the most important things about public spaces is the fact that people from all walks of life, all ages, end up going there. That's why it's a public space. Why are cities like Barcelona and also so fantastic? All three generations, grandparents, parents, children, are out on the street till 11:30, 12 at night. It's a safe place. That's why it's also a safe place. So we don't think in those terms. We don't think about the people. We always think about the instruments in urban areas. And that is something that comes out sooner or later in everything that we do. Maybe we need to get back there. We need to think about people and not about, their buildings, their roads, their buses, their cars, etc. Shomik said something which is very dear to my heart. I'll just say it and move on, which is invest in people. Right? Never in our entire history of independence have we talked about developing human capital. Forget its reason for resilience. We have never talked about developing human capital. We have never talked about developing and maintaining human capital. We have, we have been waiting for the IITians to go abroad, make money, and after 50 years come and start a unicorn over here. That's our degree of human capital investment. We have never thought about absorbing the human capital that we are generating, and that's a huge loss to society, right? And that is, so I'll not. I get very worked up about it anyway. Now, the other thing which came up in what Professor Nalkar said, right, which Nishant outside, he just mentioned it as coming full circle. That we started the day with the reason or the rationale behind giving cities more power. And what he said is that you have to look beyond the cities. So, so there is a lot more to think about. At least that's what I'm taking back. That yes, we need more responsibility, accountability of elected leaders within the cities, but there needs to be coordination with regions or communities outside the city. Right? Because otherwise we are not going to solve many of cities' problems that are coming. And finally, the day was started by Mr. Chatterjee talking about what is the purpose of each session, what are the recommendations that we are going to get, which was re-emphasized by Dr. Kelkar. He was asked to chair the second session. So I want to stop with just one thing. And I think that it really struck me that Dr. Kelkar made this point, and I fully agree with him, so I'm going to restate it, which is get the city's GST share. I think that is, because if we have a one-point agenda, I seriously think it is easier to win than if we have a list of 9 things that we need to do to make cities engines of growth or better places to stay in, right? I think this one-point agenda, I cannot visualize why anybody would disagree for rational reasons, right? They can do it for ulterior motives. That's a different matter. But really, it's very difficult to argue against it. If the city is developing this resource, why shouldn't it get a part? So I think we should, really band together and talk about this one point, right? Get the city's GST share. We can then talk about the mayor being more useful or more powerful. But if we say both, then they will give the one which is easiest to give. So money is first. Money is first. I think we should stop there. There. Before you can be pulled up for wasting. Okay, we have 7 more minutes. Yes. You can't say GST again because I've already said it.
No, I just took the mic to very simple reason is because I'm involved with almost all the institutions. I think on all the institutions we have, I want to thank all the participants, all the paper writers, and to make this, my view, a grand success, this conference. As Professor Peter said, the group was small, but there is a comfort with each other, as he said. Now, the next steps would be that paper writers may wish to revise the paper because we're going to bring out a journal for emerging market. So that's one. I don't know, is there a deadline you want to suggest? You don't mention that time? Okay. And second is that what we will do, I'll request Professor Apte and Professor Gangopadhyay at some point of time, just write some of the policy lessons, because I think we have to approach political parties on this. Some ways we have to write to them. So if we can go on behalf of this, that carry a little more weight. So let's work on more than just one, some of the policy lessons. So, and we can Okay. So all of us are happy to write to all the political parties. Thank you.
I was just intending to ask a question, but I think we can close if there's no time. Can I go ahead? No, I just was like, I agree with Professor Pete about this capacity building component, but I have been doing this for so many years, and I just don't find any interest. Uh, I don't know how we can generate that interest and some seriousness about it. One way, of course, is to develop some incentive mechanism, but that incentive mechanism is also very skewed. I, however, found a lot of uh, seriousness amongst junior staff because they considered it as something which they can use to move up the ladder, use it. So I don't know what your prescription or advice based on your experience is, but one of the things I've really understood is that you have to stay engaged. You can't just parachute in and go out. So you have to stay engaged, build that trust. So it's a long drawn process. And if it is a long drawn process, then you need a lot of resources to sustain that. And if we look at how the resource flows are resources flowing, you have this technical assistance coming through multilateral or bilateral system. That's also time bound. You have government system supporting, that's peanuts. You actually are unable to get your own cost. So this has to be made sustainable. I don't think the institutional models are also working. You mentioned Yashoda. There's one in Mysore, only one for such a big state. Everywhere we go, it's one. And they have a rural bias. Yeah.
The valedictorian session, right? So you have to give solutions only. No restatement of problems. Just 1 minute. Ravi first, yes.
I fully agree, and otherwise also I said that municipal bodies require resources, and GST could be the game changer, share in that. But let me tell you one fact, that this was the some thinking that money will solve the problem, and 2005 came the central scheme of JNURM, and all data in last 15 years shows that what we got in urban system is a financial diarrhea, which is not helping anybody. Even smart city mission or anything, cities are not able to utilize the money which was given, of course, which was given a tide fund, even SFC grants which were given, and Central Finance Commission grant, the utilization or take down ratio is less than 85%. So money was made available. What happened? It hasn't improved the service level thing. Even today, with the flagship company, everybody, even smart city mission expenditure in fiscal term is only 35% of the 2,05,000 crore rupees. So my point is money is not going to solve, because what really wrong narrative has come, one is of a centralization in last 15 years, and second is the money without any hard budgetary constraints, accountability, and third point, as everybody was, this is capacity. Cities today, ICRI report 2018, 37,000 crore was the closing balance of the municipal bodies.
Not going to disagree with you on any of the facts you're giving.
So only GST won't solve. That is my point.
But
somewhere I feel that the political system needs to address it. Second, accountability. Money with the accountability has to go. In last 15 years, earlier there was no money, but in last 15 years, money is going without accountability, without any outcome accountability, and service level benchmarks hasn't improved. In JNURM, 60,000 crore got used. Now even 1 lakh crore got used to Amrut and all that. Nothing
you're repeating. Agreed. The only point I would want to make is that in the GST, you talked about accountability. Transparency is an issue because GST data we do not get. Hopefully we will get if this happens. The accountability is very much there. If you don't do well, your city gets lower GST funds next year because you have raised lower GST. or you have gotten lower GST. So it's built in. I'm an economist. I look for incentives. I don't believe in people, right? So you'll get the best politician, you'll do the best thing. I agree with you, but I know it won't happen. To me, the reason why I think that it's a good policy is because you do badly, your GST collection will go down. You do well, your GST collection will go up. Everybody will know, everybody will see. And that's the inbuilt mechanism which GST gives. JNU didn't have that. So it's not money, it's an accountability that is built into the system that is important. Yes, Vasudha was saying.
There is also incentive on demand side for governance. Because everybody is stakeholder in that. When it comes from as a gift, nobody's concerned. But now everybody is stakeholder to do more demand for better governance.
No, I agree with GST doing it, but money won't solve the problem. It's on accountability and capital. Because it will happen.
So I'll just add to this capacity building discussion, because this is what we work on in literally every project. So the GST, what you mentioned, is really in a way performance based or performance linked, and that's what we try in pretty much all local governance projects. You improve your performance, you get more funds. So capacity building is essentially the ability to do your job, and we see it's a mix of two things: one, incentive, or the intention. You cannot build intention, you can build knowledge. So the intention really has to, what at least we see, flows from the dynamism or the intent to do from your top officers. If they go well, if they want to do things, we see the department works well. Otherwise, it doesn't. Then we're talking about these lower level officials. They don't have the training. They may not be coming from the best school. But actually, if funds are flowing and you let them do their job, they do build capacity. And we see that when you're engaged for 5 years, 10 years, you actually see this building, things changing slowly, but you have to let the funds flow, have top level guys, push a culture or an intent down, and things do change.
In fact, I'll finish with another story, an anecdote, so take it with a pinch of salt. This was, I was invited to SAI, School for Advanced International Studies, in 92 or 93, but it was after our reforms. And they had a conference on India. And they asked me to be there and give my views and talk to the people who were presenting there, etc. So I was there as an observer, taking notes. And I must tell you that the papers that were presented, our undergraduate students would not write. And these were well-known professors coming from well-known universities. Why? Because of the lack of knowledge on India. 10 years later, I was called again. It's around 2001 or 2002, after 9 years. I was amazed at the quality of the papers that were presented. Capacity grows if you allow people. If पहले से Einstein बिना हम किसी को नहीं लेंगे, तो Einstein नहीं बने. So you have to start. This thing about capacity, they don't have capacity, is just preventing us from growing that capacity. We have to let it grow. These things cannot be learned in a classroom or from textbooks. Right? Most of what we are discussing are things that you learn on the job. And therefore the job has to be there. And that's why I think, yes, we need to build capacity. But we cannot first build capacity, then expect it to work. We have to do it with the system and learn and have processes and systems in place that corrects mistakes. That we need to think about. But we have to start building the capacity through work. Okay, so now thank you very much. We have overshot time by 4 minutes. I had nothing to do with it because I finished at 4:53. No, don't blame me. Huh?
I think Chairman agreed that we can do thousands of things, but if we want something to get done, then to prioritize as to what is the most important thing to be done in terms of cities. And you said getting GST for cities is important. And therefore we should focus on this one particular issue which makes financially the cities buoyant enough to do their things. It will lead to a number of problems. I think we discussed that in the morning itself, that since we haven't done any reforms for the last 50 years, obviously the reform agenda is very long and all of those have to be done. But if you have to get something done in an atmosphere where nothing is done, then you have to focus on something. So from that point of view, I think it is very important that we focus on the most important issue, and that is getting GST for the urban local bodies. The other point that I forgot in the morning, and this was discussed later, that we are asking for autonomy for the cities, but just autonomy will not yield all the results, beneficial results that we want. What does the state do in that case? I think the paper that was circulated, that mentions that the state has to move from an operational role in cities to a strategic role. There are lots of strategic things that states have to do, but they cannot every day. For instance, he's talking about JNNURM. What is the kind of mechanism that you had set for spending JNNURM? Everything had to be vetted by the government of India. Now, if you have that kind of a system where every paper goes up and down, and then you say you've spent only 35%, that kind of a system does not work. If you give the money, ask for the outputs. If the outputs are not there, then you blame. Yeah, don't give it next time, as you said. But the mechanism, even in smart cities, is the same kind of mechanism. You have no trust in the local body. You have established an SPV. In some of the states, even large corporations have to get their budgets vetted by the collector, and the collector has no time to vet them. It could take 6 months, it could take 9 months. Now, if this is the kind of system in which you are working, don't keep blaming the ULB. First, set your things right before you start pointing a finger at the lowest functioner.
On that note, I would like to...
Before I sign off, no, on my behalf and all of us behalf, I will thank Vishal Gaikwad. Vishal Gaikwad, because he has really...
I'm not being allowed to thank anybody. So let me just say it in one sentence, right? Thank you all, including Vishal.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Now we come to the end of this session, and just I want to formally thank everyone, and also a big round of applause to our PIC colleagues, because they have taken this so much effort, and without them this event couldn't be possible. So big round of applause to our PIC colleagues. Yeah, because I can't take all of these. So yeah. So now we have come to the end of today's program, and so we wish you a great time ahead. And with a one promise that next year that we will again meet with some another topic in the same time. Yeah, thank you.
But one thing that Dr. Kelkar was saying, I want to, and I didn't let him, but this is about the papers that he mentioned, right?
Yes.
So we're going to bring the papers out in the Review of Market Integration, which is a SAGE published journal. And Nishant and Professor Apdev are going to follow up on that and give you the deadlines which you have to strictly meet. And we're also going to have the discussions, comments. Right? Okay, thank you very much.